On February 22nd, Jose Ibarra put on a black hat, a hoodie-style jacket, and some black kitchen-style disposable gloves. And he went hunting for females on the University of Georgia's campus.
Illegal immigrant, shoplifter, gang member, and less than 24 hours after taking the life of 22-year-old student nurse Laken Riley on the 22nd of February 2024, Jose Ibarra, a 26-year-old married father of one from Venezuela, was picked up by police. If the perpetrator's criminal acts hadn't been so serious, we could all have a good laugh at the stupidity and clumsiness of the man that led the police straight to his front door. Do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. A devout Christian and a young lady with lots of friends, Laken Riley used to go running 3 to 6 times a week, often with Connolly, one of her 3 roommates. While out jogging, following any one or more of the commonly used jogging trails around her campus, which were generally considered safe, Laken would often call her mother or her friends. Working as a part-time babysitter and planning, in fact, to specialise as a paediatric nurse, Laken was someone you could count on to attend lectures and to generally be punctual. But who's this guy who's suddenly come and stood in her way 10 minutes into her jog of this morning? It's around 9:11 a.m. on the 22nd of February 2024. The 911 operator on the line to Laken has asked Laken to describe her emergency, Laken having since called 911 because the guy just won't let her get past. But now the guy has knocked the phone out of Laken's hand and he's getting all manner of scratches on his arms and in other places from Laken, who is fighting her attacker with absolutely everything she's got. It's 12:38 p.m. In Ockeney Park, just behind Lake Herrick, police are gathered around a young woman who they've just found lying on the ground with her top pulled up above her breasts. She's unconscious and without a pulse, and with her skull all smashed in. On arriving shortly after this point, paramedics officially pronounced the woman dead, the attempts of the police to resuscitate her having sadly failed. It was later discovered that, before being savagely and repeatedly bashed in the head with a rock, Laken had been strangled. Now, Ibarra isn't just evil and vicious, he is, as I said before, stupid. At the time of his acts of butchery against Laken, he was staying in the apartment of his brother Diego, which they shared likewise with their brother heinous and with a woman whose relationship with any of the 3 males I can't confirm. When, after reviewing the CCTV from the campus, police put out a BOLO, be on the lookout, warning in the university and requested anyone who knew the identity of the suspect that they had traced through the CCTV to come forward, suggestions immediately came flooding in. Diego, you see, was working at this point at UGA, University of Georgia, itself in a food service role. The accommodation that came with the job was located on campus. Now, we would of course all prefer it if people just didn't commit murder or harm others in any way. But if someone is going to bludgeon and batter another to death, then yes, let the person be as thoroughly stupid as the perpetrator in this case, so that, like the perpetrator in this case, due to their failure to cover their evil tracks, they too get arrested the very morning after they commit their evil act. The perpetrator was caught on camera at around 9:44 a.m. on the morning of his act, dumping his hoodie in a recycling bin in the campus grounds. And yes, of course, our brainless perpetrator discarded a heavily incriminating item practically on the doorstep of his crime and practically on his own front doorstep. If, for whatever reason, he had been unable to dump the item somewhere a lot further from both his home and the crime scene, burning it could have been a solution. We're glad he was stupid enough to dump the item where he dumped it though. The perpetrator chooses to keep his cap since, having examined it for incriminating evidence, like the kind that his hoodie picked up, more on that later, he judges that it's all clear. He could have just disposed of it by burning it or by dumping it a lot further away from the crime scene and from his home to be on the safe side. What he actually does is to return it to its owner the following day, the owner being someone very close to home. The man clearly fails to realise that he might have got some of his victim's DNA on the cap, which he just can't see however closely he looks. In fact, who knows? The suggested DNA might come from the blood from the victim, which has gotten to the cap and which the perpetrator doesn't see. A few yards on, the perpetrator chucks certain other items into some bushes. His actions remind me of Hansel and Gretel, I think, leaving a trail from their home to the forest. That's right, isn't it? It's as if the man is calling out, "Hey police, I'm over here. I'm the KILLER. Come and get me." We're glad that the man is leaving so many clues to his guilt in Laken's MURDER, and we're glad that, given that all of this was caught on camera, the prospect of which the man seems blissfully unaware of, he's making it so easy for police to trace him. Now, just look at this man's stroll. Calm, purposeful, bold, fairly rapid, head up. No indication whatsoever of either panic or fear. As I'll show in more detail later, we are seeing this man 16 minutes after he took an innocent young woman's life. It's almost as if the perpetrator is oblivious to the evil act that he's just committed. He feels no remorse whatsoever for what he's just done. That calm, confident, purposeful striding that he's doing speaks, I'd say, the satisfaction rather, that the man is now feeling. He took a young woman's life because, as I say, he just felt like hurting someone and destroying them. He's feeling powerful, dominant and content. UGA police soon realise, after arriving at the student complex the following morning, that the young man sitting outside an apartment wearing a red top along with a cap that looks a lot like the one that the man that they're looking for was seen wearing the day before isn't who they're looking for. The green card that the man shows them, which identifies him as Jose Ibarra, is a blatant fake, but that's not the priority of the police at that point. The chap called heinous and the woman called Rosbeli Flores Bello, who are also out on the apartment's porch and who are also in the US illegally, are similarly of minimal interest to the police. All sleepy and groggy, the perpetrator tells the police that his knuckles are only red because the weather is cold, and the scratches on his arms and hands and on the back of his neck, what scratches? There aren't any. Those little marks are nothing. This really was the perpetrator's answer to the question of how he got the many scratches in the places named.
They're laughing in those videos. Smoking, talking on their phones, talking to one another, all four of those people inside that residence, chillaxing and saying like, "My friend, do me a favor, show me your hands. My friend, how did you get those injuries?" And his first response is that of a monstrously guilty individual. What scratches? Y'all don't see any scratches. We don't see any scratches. So in order to find him not guilty, you would have to disbelieve your own eyes.
The man's had a good night's sleep. Sweet dreams. His evil act of the day before means nothing to him. Direct evidence proves the fact directly, all by itself. Video footage clearly showing Defendant A stabbing someone is direct proof that Defendant A committed an act of stabbing. Circumstantial evidence, in contrast, requires an inference to connect it to a conclusion of a fact. Finding Defendant B's fingerprint at the scene of a burglary isn't, in and of itself, proof that Defendant B committed the burglary. In this MURDER case, the fact that the kitchen gloves found in the home of the perpetrator were identical to the ones that the man dumped in the bushes doesn't, of course, prove anything against the perpetrator. It's neither direct evidence nor circumstantial evidence. In contrast, the testimony of Diego and Rosbeli that Jose Ibarra was the man shown in the video footage depicting a man dumping stuff in a recycling bin and in some bushes offered at least circumstantial evidence of the perpetrator's guilt. So, likewise, did the two selfies that the perpetrator posted online before setting out on his murderous quest on the morning of the 22nd of February 2024. One showed him wearing the cap that he was seen wearing in the video footage, while the other showed him wearing both the cap and the hoodie that he had worn that day. The most compelling evidence against the perpetrator, though, was the DNA that was found under his victim's fingernails. It belonged to the perpetrator. Similarly, the blood and hair that was found on the hoodie that the perpetrator chucked into a recycling bin belonged to the victim. Earlier, I said that the perpetrator knocked the victim's phone out of her hand. The presence of the perpetrator's thumbprint on the phone is what betrayed the man's physical contact with the phone. The man may not necessarily have knocked it, though. In any event, of the 3 black disposable kitchen gloves that were found in the bushes where the perpetrator dumped them, one or more of which carry in his victim's blood, there was one with a tear in the thumb. A white cup carrying the man's DNA was found in an area that lay approximately halfway between the crime scene and apartment 114. Lastly, the man's voice was heard saying "okay" in Laken's 911 call, while Laken's smartwatch had recorded that Laken's heart had stopped beating at 9:28 a.m. on the day in question. The man had no alibi for his whereabouts between the time of Laken's 911 call, which came at 9:11 a.m. that morning, and the time at which Laken's heart stopped beating. Conversely, the perpetrator was captured on CCTV, to remind you, only 16 minutes after Laken's heart stopped beating, dumping some of the evidence against him. In court, the perpetrator's defence argued that all this was evidence of the guilt of Diego Ibarra, the perpetrator's brother. According to them, the evidence was, at any rate, circumstantial, dependent on circumstances that could only be guessed at or inferred, and speculative.
The evidence that Jose Ibarra killed anyone is circumstantial. And it's this kind of gymnastics that it will take to tell the story with this circumstantial evidence.
This, in contrast, is what the prosecution said.
The video evidence identifies him. His own brother identifies him. His roommate, Rosebelly, identifies him. The people who he was living with condemn him. But his digital evidence of posting selfies of himself wearing what is basically his rapist gear an hour before he leaves his house, that condemns him. He has condemned himself. The defendant's DNA is under the right fingernails of Laken Riley. And it is only Laken and this defendant in that sample. What scratches, he says? All of those scratches. And there were more scratches than that, because when Daniela Stewart, and those photos are in evidence to you, when she photographed him and made him take his shirt off, there are scratches on his back. His back. And you know what that's consistent with? That is consistent with him asphyxiating her, being on top of her, compressing her chest, and smashing her head in with that rock. It is the defendant's thumbprint on Laken's phone. But about 14 minutes afterwards, he is seen on video dumping a jacket that you have here in evidence that you've seen a lot, so I'm not going to show it to you again, that has a mixture, and this is traditional DNA. This is not true allele. This is not probabilistic genotyping. This is traditional DNA, and it is a mixture between only 2 people, Laken Riley and this defendant. And it's no mistake that it is blood, a mixture of their blood on that jacket. And on that jacket also are 29 hairs that are consistent with Laken Riley, that all have been not all of them, but several of them have been forcibly removed from her head. And they were wrapped around the button that you see in some of the photographs when Officer Davis testified, the way that he saw it. And now I guess the defense will have you believe he just threw away that jacket right at this moment just because he just didn't want it anymore. That's not reasonable. He threw away that jacket because he knew exactly what was on it. He knew it was his blood, he knew it was her blood, and he knew he had to get rid of it. And he also knew that he had to get rid of his gloves, and so what he does further on in this frame is you can see him take them out of his pocket and throw it in the bushes. And on those gloves is Laken Riley's blood. He threw away the gloves because he knew what he had done. He knew her DNA or her blood would be on that, and he got rid of it. And that hat right there, he couldn't see her blood. And he gives it back to his brother. And luckily for all of us, his brother decides to wear that hat that next day. And we know his brother wasn't wearing the hat on that day because you got to see the video for yourself where Diego goes to work on the day of Laken Riley's killing. He's at work. and he's wearing a completely different hat.
I think, in view of the prosecution's case, an explanation of the defence is called for, our question being, how could the defence, educated and intelligent as they presumably are, argue for the defendant's innocence? Wouldn't they have served their client himself better by persuading the man to take a plea deal rather than go into a foregone conclusion of a trial? The answers are actually very simple. 1. Money. 2. The defence can argue that they don't actually know that the defendant is guilty. That said, the evidence against Ibarra, which the defence tried to dismiss as circumstantial, was, rather, to quote the prosecution, overwhelming and powerful, the judge himself endorsing that description, as I'll show later. This wasn't a jury trial, but a judge-only trial, known more commonly as a bench trial. The defence thought that this was the safest option for their client, given the nationwide outrage and indignation triggered by the case.
This individual crossed the border illegally because of our ridiculous border policies. He then was put up via taxpayer money in a hotel in New York City. We, the taxpayer, put him up. He then was put on a taxpayer-funded government flight to Georgia. We, the taxpayer, via the government, paid for that. And then he also, as we know, is a member of a terrifying Venezuelan gang that has popped up all over the country, again, because of our border policies or lack thereof.
Just 1 week ago, a beautiful 22-year-old nursing student from Georgia was barbarically attacked, almost unrecognizable, while she was out on her morning run. She was doing keep herself in shape. She was a beautiful young woman. She was a great person, best nursing student there was. I spoke to her parents yesterday. They're incredible people. They're devastated beyond belief. But she was beautiful, just so beautiful in so many ways, and brutally assaulted, horrifically beaten, kidnapped, and savagely murdered. The monster that charged in the death is an illegal alien migrant who was led into our country and released into our communities by crooked Joe Biden. He's crooked.
Laken Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself.
Laken was found with her breasts exposed. There was no evidence to show that she was RAPED, but even so,
the evidence in this case has spoken loud and clear that he is Laken Riley's killer, and that he killed her because she would not let him rape her.
in my ignorant opinion, unaliving Laken wasn't necessarily a matter of the perpetrator getting her back, if you will, for not letting him sexually violate her. If we take the view that it was to silence her, then, as we can see, we're saying that the perpetrator would most probably have unalived her even if he had been able to RAPE her. If, in contrast, we argue that the perpetrator was just desperate to hurt a woman and derive dominance and control over her, we're saying that on having his first method for achieving those goals denied, he simply switched to a different method, which sadly worked. I say more about the motivation behind RAPE a bit later. Now, do you wonder what the prosecution is referencing with this comment?
And look no further. You have to look no further to his actions 73 minutes before he encountered her on the trail to know what he was up to that day.
Personally, I think she means the hour, virtually, beginning just before 7 a.m. on MURDER Day that the perpetrator spent stalking the campus home of a lone female student. It's 6:58 a.m. on Thursday the 22nd of February 2024. This is the first of the numerous visits, 6 or more in total I believe, that this man, Mr. X, wearing all dark including an Adidas cap, a crossover bag and sliders, which are basically slip-on trainers, makes to the front door of this apartment. Apartment 114, the apartment being visited by Mr. X, is the home of a female postgrad student and is located in a student complex. Around 6 hours later, the body of a young woman is found in a patch of wood only minutes away from that complex. Anyway, there can, I believe, only be one reason for Mr. X opening the screen door to apartment 114 as he's now doing. He wants to get into the apartment. Wonder why? He doesn't know the young lady living there clearly, or he'd just be knocking on her door. What's he after then? I'd say he might be looking to burgle the apartment, only A, I happen to know that this man's acts of theft tend to take the form of shoplifting, not burglary, and B, he knows that there's someone in. We learn this later, it's not necessarily obvious from this footage. Burglars generally prefer a property to be empty when they burgle it. Mr. X now goes to the back of the building and peers in through the window, we learn of that later, whose blinds are open. Gosh, talk about being a peeping Tom. It's now 7:06. Mr. X is back at apartment 1114's door, and now, 3 minutes on, he walks away, having obviously given up trying to get into the apartment, whatever his reason for wanting to get in was. It's now 7:33 and, whoa, who's this figure dressed all in dark walking towards the same apartment block from before and heading, in fact, to the very same apartment from before, 114? I thought Mr. X had given up and gone. Honestly, why does he think it will be easier for him to break into the apartment now than it would have been when he first called by? Did he go and get some sort of equipment for breaking in? Or is he just hoping that in the last 24 minutes either the window or the door behind the screen door will have been opened so he can just either climb in or walk in? Whatever the guy wants to get in for, he's clearly both determined to get in and ravenously hungry to do so. Our protagonist, or more like antagonist, is off round the back again, wanting another peek through the back window.
I'm gonna pause it at 7:39. So the last clip that we saw at 7:33, did that individual go back behind building S again?
He did.
Okay.
Mr. X may well now be trying to figure out a way to enter the apartment through the cutout window that he's standing in front of, behind which there's a stairwell. He's facing forward with his back to the said window, standing in front of it. It's now 7:40 a.m. and he's so far had a pretty frustrating 42 minutes. Hello? Our antagonist has just gone through the window where he was standing. Now how did he manage that? He seems to have just literally walked through the wall. The window was open all along, clearly. So why did he wait until then to actually open it and go in? Wherever the stairwell behind the window leads to, it clearly doesn't need to entry into 114 since, wait, here's Mr. X again. Now you see him, now you don't, but all he ends up doing is to find a route not into the vagina of the woman in apartment 114, but to the outside path of the second floor. Here's our guy walking past that one apartment that he just can't get enough of before slipping around the back of the block again to see what he can see. 7:46 a.m. Mr. X once again tries the screen door to apartment 114 before again nipping round the back for another 2 minutes of God only knows what, other than peering through the back window, that is. (7:48) Mr. X is round the back. 7:49 Mr. X is round the front, looking like he's given the door another try before again heading round the back. 7:51 Mr. X is back at the front door to 114 and I am seriously dizzy with all this man's toing and froing. He doesn't stop though, he's not dizzy, since between 7:51 where we left him and now 7:54 where we see him now a yard or two away from the door to apartment 114, he's been on yet another trip round the back. He wants that door open wider than he's got it, just look at him. Wait, what's this? Did he just spot someone on the other side of the door? Is that why he's just ducked before yet again sneaking round the back? It's now 7:56 and Mr. X is heading south and then disappearing into the woods. He's just walking around the trees. On the route that he's following, there's no path. Mr. X, whoever he is, can only have been harbouring nefarious intentions, I believe, for the occupant of the apartment that he spent the best part of an hour casing. I think, to be exact, that he was looking to commit any one or more criminal offences against the woman. If so, we can't help but notice that the man neither disguised his face, which is confirmed later even if that's not obvious from the footage of the man prowling the apartment, nor hides it. He stalked the apartment in broad daylight in front of a small number of witnesses, and even if he happens to be unaware of the prevalence of CCTV across the developed world, that still leaves all his other blunders. Whoever this man is and whatever crime, if any, he may go on to commit, there are two key lessons to his character coming from his 56 minutes at the apartment complex. Number one, the man is phenomenally stupid. Number two, the man is hell-bent on claiming someone for his planned offences. He is literally hunting and stalking lone women. He is hungry to commit an act of evil on a defenceless female that will give him the sense of dominance and the satisfaction of destruction and causing someone suffering that he so avidly and blatantly craves. These sadistic desires tend to be the motive for RAPE, in case that's what Mr. X has in mind, and not so much sexual desire. You know, I said in the very last moments of my presentation of the perpetrator's stalking of apartment 114 that the man's act of ducking and then sneaking once more round the back seemed to be his response to having just been seen by whoever was in the apartment. What the resident herself tells us about what happened once she saw the man is, I think, pretty disturbing.
First of all, what time did you wake up?
I would say around 7.
And at some point in the morning, did you notice something unusual?
Yes, I did. I heard some fidgeting sounds on my main door, front door.
Where were you when you heard those sounds?
I was in the shower.
Describe to the court what you actually heard.
I was in the shower and I heard somebody trying to open my door. And initially I thought it was coming from upstairs, but when I stepped out of the bathroom, I noticed that it was coming from my front door. When I went to see who it was, I saw someone through the peephole trying to open it.
Could you describe the person that you saw?
The person had a black hood, black hat, black jacket, and black gloves, but I could not see the person's face.
Why couldn't you see their face?
I think it's because of the cap. It was blocking their face.
And when you said they ducked down, what do you mean by that?
So the moment I said, hello, who is it? They ducked down, I think, to avoid being seen through the peephole. I saw them bending and walking away.
Did you see that same individual again?
Yes, I saw them in my living room window.
Yes, you heard right. After realising that the woman had seen him, the perpetrator didn't take flight as one might expect. He brazenly continued to prowl the apartment, trying yet again to see inside by again looking through the back window. He wasn't scared, he wasn't put off.
And how did you see that individual again, and how much time passed from the time that you saw them at the door till you saw them in the window?
As soon as I saw them at the door, I went to pick up my phone from the bedroom and I came back to the door again and then tried calling for help, which is when I turned around and looked at the window and I noticed someone there. Then I could see them trying to look inside.
When you say trying to look inside, what exactly did you see?
I saw the person's cap jutting out through the window.
And did you see them in your window?
Yes.
What did you see them doing in your window?
I could see just their head and the cap part of it, their hat part of it, and they were trying to look inside my apartment.
The trial judge didn't call the evidence against the perpetrator circumstantial or speculative. Rather, Judge H. Patrick Haggard, echoing the prosecution's description of the evidence, called it overwhelming.
But I wrote down two things in the closing. One was a statement by Ms. Ross that the evidence was overwhelming and powerful.
The perpetrator's 10 convictions, Judge Haggard duly finding the man guilty and sentencing him to life without parole, include 3 counts of felony MURDER, 1 count of malice MURDER, aggravated assault with intent to RAPE, kidnapping, false imprisonment, concealing the death of another, hindering a 911 call, and a peeping Tom offence. That last offence offering some justice to the lady from apartment 114. Poor Laken Riley. I'm sorry for her, her family and her friends. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.